In this video, I'm going to give you a rundown of all the workstation and sampler synth Grooveboxes that I've owned over the years. This isn't a definitive guide, but I'll try and give you all the pros and cons that I can remember of each of these machines when I owned them. This might also be a nice little video for anyone who's hoping to buy one of these machines secondhand. Also, before we start this video, I want to thank my current patrons. I want to thank all my current subscribers. I also want to thank Chevy Traveller, one of my subscribers, for showing me some software, which ironically I'm not using for this video because I don't need it, but he actually showed me some software that I could utilize my iPhone to record my MPC live. So thank you, Chevy Traveller. Big up yourself for that, mate. I really appreciate that. I will talk to you soon. I'll also be playing full tracks that I finished entirely within a lot of these machines. So please sit back and enjoy those. If not, you can just skip through to the next bit of information on the machines that I'm going to cover. I'll also be doing a couple of cuckoo impressions because I can't say analog rhythm without wanting to do a cuckoo impression, because cuckoo just makes it sound so much cooler than when I say it. So I do apologise, cuckoo, but please stick around for that. It's quite funny. So the first machine is the Yamaha EX7 sampling synthesizer workstation. I absolutely love this machine. I bought it cash in hand from a number of male prostitution and escorting jobs that I was doing around Soho at the time. But I bought that cash in hand from Turnkey in that's not true. I was doing manual labour. It wasn't that glamorous or naughty. But yeah, I walked into Turnkey and I said, I'll have one of those, my good man. Amazing sampler synthesizer. In fact, I got offered a record deal from someone that you guys may know called Ray Keith. He's a well-known drum and bass DJ and producer. And at the time he had a label called Dread Recordings and Penny Black. And he said, did I want a 4-track EP on Penny Black? But unfortunately it fell through because I was literally doing everything in the EX7 just off of headphones. I had no acoustic treatment in my room. I had no separate outputs or anything. I didn't even have a mixing desk or anything at that time. And although the tracks were produced well and were good enough for Ray to offer me this deal, he said you need to get the production quality up to professional level before we can go ahead with this. So I completely understand that. There was no resentment there at all. It was just I didn't have any additional money after buying that keyboard. The job that I had ended relatively soon after. It was probably because I was getting really stoned and just sitting up all night working on music on the EX7, to be honest. But yeah, there was a number of factors that kind of stopped me from actually being able to afford some studio time. So there you go, so you live and learn. But the thing that I could have got, which I couldn't also afford at the time, it was an AIB1, which is a separate output board which gave you 6 additional individual outputs. So yeah, I could have got one of those and split those out, but then again, I didn't have any monitors and I didn't have a mixing desk, and I didn't really know anyone else that I could hire a studio to get these mixes done. But there you go, guys. So the pros of this keyboard, it was really massive. It had really nice keyboard action, loads of real-time controls. The synth engine was very, very powerful, really nice, mad sounds that you could get out of it. Loads of automation options. The sequencer was spot on, it had loads of detail. The sampler was very good. The effects were very good. There were certain limitations, but you know, overall a very good keyboard. The cons, the storage options were a bit dire. It came with a 3.5-inch floppy disk, so it was one of those scenarios where you had to have about 10 discs, or well, like a whole pack of floppy disks to save a full song with all the sample data. I ended up getting the ASIB one, which was a SCSI interface which you could install in it. So both the ASIB one and the AEIB one were compatible with the SU700 sampler Groovebox, the RS7000, and all the A series samplers that Yamaha produced, the A3000, 4000, 5000. I think they came stock, the ASIB one at least, that came stock with the A series samplers. So if you do want to get a Yamaha EX7 or its bigger brother, the EX5, which had more polyphony and a few other extra bells and whistles under the hood, or ideally the EX5R, the rack version, they also did a Millennium version, which was a silver version of the keyboard of the EX5. But yeah, if you pick any one of those up, you can actually get the ASIB one interface already installed, but do check with the seller if you see one on eBay. That comes as stock inside the A series samplers. So when you would have bought one of these brand new back in the day, it would already have the SCSI interface, and it just allows you to hook up a zip drive or another compatible SCSI drive. But they are quite noisy, those SCSI hard drives. The zip drives aren't too bad, but again, they're very hard to find. I do kind of regret selling my EX7 and the zip drive. I think it was a Zip 250, an iOmega Zip 250, and I think they're pretty rare now. I've not really seen those on eBay for a very long time. But that's the setup I had, and this is one track that I produced off of it entirely in the machine. There was no additional mixing done outside of this at all. It may have just been normalised within Ableton Live a few years later when I got it off of one of my old CDs that I burnt it to back in the day. But this track is called Swinging. It's a little jazzy drum and bass thing that I produced under my DJ name at the time, which was Plover, and I'll put a link in the description to all my other Plover drum and bass tracks, which you guys can check out on SoundCloud if you want. So this is called Swinging by Plover. So next up is the Yamaha RM1x. So this I bought in, I think, about 2006, 2007. I was living in southeast London at the time, and I just fancied a standalone machine. I was DJing at the time and using Reason, and Reason was getting a bit boring, and I just thought, oh, this thing looks quite interesting. And I bought this for about 40 UK pounds from someone who lived about 2 miles up the road from me. And they knew that it was probably worth more, and they just wanted shot of it. I think they was just doing a bit of a house clearance. So I picked it up. It was in spot on condition. It was all fully working. There wasn't a mark on it. But at the time I didn't know enough about MIDI sequencing and sequencers and stuff, and I kind of wanted a sampler, and I didn't really realise that this thing was just like a rompler. That is to say, it would just play back kind of, you know, stock sounds that you could do quite a lot to in terms of pitch and automation and stuff. It had a lot of really nice features about it. You know, you could record a lot of the MIDI information into it. The sequencer is really, really very powerful. If you want a sequencer aside from the MPC, these are excellent. This and the RS7000 have exactly the same sequencing engine. It's just the RS7000 has a sampling engine, but it's a piece of crap. So, well, that's my opinion on it. The sampling feature of the RS7000 is not worth it. So you're better off buying an RM1X if you just want a really decent MIDI sequencer. So the track that I produced and played you guys in one of my previous videos, the Audio Tracks Part 2 video, there was a track in that called Universal. That was actually partly made on the Yamaha RM1X. I did a lot of the sequencing in that. And the sounds were coming from a Novation Ultranova, and the Yamaha RM1X did the sequencing for that. And then there was just a bit of further editing in Ableton Live thereafter. So yeah, I won't play that because you can go and check that out. That's in my Audio Tracks Part 2 video. So yeah, really nice, but the cons, again, it just had a floppy drive. You didn't really need a lot of storage, to be honest, because it was just MIDI data. There was no sample data. But yeah, very good sequencer, really nice. You could swap the sort of the phrases in and out and change the sounds and make different notes play back different sounds, and you wanted to swap things around to see how they sounded with different notes. Yeah, very good. Go and check out an RM1X, guys. They are very good quality machines, very well built. They look cool, really nice big screen. I would only really buy one of these secondhand if I just wanted something a little bit different to do some MIDI sequencing with. But the sound quality is pretty decent. I found all the Yamaha machines that I've owned to be very high quality sound. So after that, I moved up to Liverpool in around 2008, 2009. And I think in 2009, I bought my first kind of sampling Groovebox, which was the Roland MC-808. I absolutely hated this machine. I mean, it looked nice. It had these sort of motorized faders on top of it, but they made loads of noise. They were really clicky, so you couldn't really concentrate. Every time you switch sequence, not only would they jump up to different values, it was just really clunky, and there was almost like a glitch or a pause when you kind of jumped sequences. So for playing out live, it would have been absolutely terrible. I don't think it was the particular machine I had. It had loads of latency issues, loads of timing issues. I definitely remember looking up online and seeing other people complaining about the same issues that I had with it. So I don't recommend the Roland MC-808. It had quite a nice sound quality to it, but you know, it was kind of unusable. I can't even remember if I actually sampled anything into it because I just owned it probably for about 4 weeks before selling it again. After that, I bought the Yamaha SU700. These things are really amazing. I only really sold the last one that I had. I've owned 3 over the years. The first one I bought in about 2009, 2010, again when I was living up in Liverpool. And this thing just had some really interesting features, and it looked very different. All the coloured knobs on it and the coloured pads, the pads had quite a nice feel to them. The sound quality was just superb. Really warm, really nice vintage sound quality to it. A very warm sound that you got out of that machine. Again, this could accept the ASIB1 SCSI board, and I think you could add additional RAM. It came with 4 megabytes and you could add 64, so I think you got fully maxed out with 68 megabytes of RAM. But what it could do with that RAM was really good. Yeah, really nice machine. I highly recommend these, but you will really need to get the most out of it an ASIB1 SCSI interface. As I said, you can get these out of a Yamaha A3, 4 or 5000. They should come as stock, but do check before you buy one of those because finding them on their own can be a little bit tricky. But yeah, the SU700, not an awful lot of bad things to say about it. It had a lot of limitations, but at the same time, it was one of those machines that really forced you to get the best out of it. So this is a track that I finished entirely on the SU700. It's called Toulouse, and I just called myself Stickman. I've no idea. I think it's because my daughter had this little Stickman toy at the time, and it just made me think, oh, I'm going to call myself Stickman. So the track's called Toulouse, and the samples were from Too Shy by Kajagoogoo. I made this kind of French disco house track, and that's why I called it Toulouse. So next up is the MPC 1000. So I bought this in around 2011 from someone who lived around the corner from me when I lived up in Liverpool, Again, I was just really bored with computer production and I really wanted a bit more of a fully fledged kind of Groovebox workstation. So I got this for an absolute steal. It was about £350. It had been used about 3 or 4 times, and the guy that I bought it from just used it to have backing tracks when he played out live. And I did actually warn him. I said, are you sure you want to get rid of this? Because I'm sure these are worth about 500 quid. And he said, no, it's yours, mate. He goes, I don't really need it. I want it to go to a good home. So fair play to that guy. I can't remember his name, but big up yourself. I got myself a really nice MPC 1000. So the pros, obviously it had the MPC workflow, really nice JJOS that you could load into it. So you got access to direct sampling to track instead of having to go to the dedicated sampler. It was a really nice feature. You also got a looper in the JJOS. Sound quality, really warm. I thought it was a really nice and punchy machine. And I really like the form factor. It's just a little bit smaller than the MPC Live, really nice portable size, even though it didn't run on a battery. But yeah, it just had a really nice weight to it and size to it, and yeah, nice little machine. But the cons mostly were just because of the pad malfunctions that are widely reported with the MPC 1000. A lot of people say that Akai seem to have kind of cut corners on the actual manufacturing, because a lot of people I've heard have said there was various sort of build quality issues with this, and it's kind of pale in comparison to the MPC 2500 and upwards. Very noticeable. I've had a couple of 2500s, and yeah, definitely the build quality was different between this and the MPC 5000 as well. So the track that I finished on this was not actually done on my first MPC 1000, but I will play you it. It's by one of my other pseudonyms called Astra Magnum, and the track is called Cybertronic. Some of you guys that got access to the quarry, you probably would have heard this track. But this was done entirely on the MPC 1000. I was sequencing my Novation Chaos Rack with this, and I just was sampling in the synth parts. But the finished track was done entirely in the MPC 1000. So after that, I bought an MPC 2500 SE. And I got this from a guy down in Wimbledon in southeast London. And I had to say to this guy, are you sure you want to let this go? Because he sold this to me for £625. It was absolutely brand new. He said he'd used it twice. I said, are you sure you want to let this go? These were about £900 brand new. And I think West End DJ, which is another well-known shop in the West End of London, they were still selling these new at the time, I think. I think they still had a couple in stock. And the guy was just happy to let it go again to a good home. So I was just like, great, snapped it up. I got it home, absolutely loved it for about 6 months. And then again, because I had an Octatrack at the same time, I was just more into the Octatrack workflow. I just wasn't into the whole pad thing at the time and chopping up samples, and I didn't really need it. And I do regret selling this. I actually sold this to quite a well-known electronic producer in the UK. I'm not going to name who it is, but it was someone quite famous, and they bought it off me on eBay. And I got in contact with them about 3 years later and said, any chance you want to sell it back to me? And they said, no, I kind of love it. But I can understand why. The 2500 is just a really kind of, I don't know, it's quite an enigma of a machine. The form factor is lovely. It's got a really sporty look about it, particularly the SE. It's got these carbon end cheeks and the white and the black. I mean, it just appeals so much to that kind of cool, futuristic hip-hop aesthetic. I think Akai hit the nail on the head with the design of the 2500 and particularly the SE version. It was just beautiful. The 2500 obviously had the form factor, the design. You could load the JJOS with the looper and the direct sampling to tracks. And of course the classic MPC workflow. There's not much else to be said about that. Beautiful looking machine and a future classic, if not already. Cons, none. I didn't have it long enough, but to be honest, I didn't discover anything that I didn't like about that machine. I just wasn't using it at the time. I should have put it into storage, but I didn't really have the money to justify keeping it and not using it. So I didn't actually finish any tracks on the 2500 SE, so I will move straight on to the MPC 5000. So I've had 3 MPC 5000. The last one that I had, I sold this year to fund the MPC Live. I could have kept hold of it. I wasn't that tight for cash, but again, it would have been a bit of a luxury to hold on to it and be buying a brand new MPC Live. And I just thought, what is the point? I mean, it was a really hard decision for me because I did lose the synth, and it's meant that I'm really struggling now to organise all my synth patches because a lot of them weren't named properly and I wasn't very organised. I mean, it was just getting too much trying to make the music and do a full-time job at the time and everything else. So yeah, I do really wish Akai would have stuck with the well, I'll go through the pros of it first. So the form factor, this thing just looks like a futuristic tank or something. It's just got this really imposing look to it. Huge weight, but not so much that it's ridiculous. It's easily carryable under one arm, particularly if you're a big buff guy like me. Yeah. And so yeah, really nice form factor. The synth was amazing. Not the best analog modeling synth in the world, but you could get some really nice, authentic kind of 80s synthwave stuff out of it, and that's why I ended up using this a lot for my Astra Magnum project. So a hell of a lot of tracks that I finished were done entirely in the MPC 5000 because it had the really nice synthesizer and sampler kind of contrast, and I think it really sat nicely in the mix, the synth. And you could load about 20 iterations of that synth in before it sort of struggled with memory. I think it was like a 20 voice synth. So pretty powerful stuff. The build quality was really great. I had no issues with my MPC 5000s. Other than the screen got a little bit of a burnout towards one of the corners. I think this was widely reported, but then you could just adjust the contrast down to compensate for that. Wasn't a big issue. Sound quality, again, really beefy and big, heavy, weighty sound quality from the MPC 5000. Had the workflow, obviously. Storage options were great. I actually loaded an SSD drive. I think it was something like a 256 gigabyte solid state drive into the underside of the MPC 5000, which eliminated all the horrible noise from the sort of clunky, clicky, factory installed Western Digital 80 gig hard drive, which was just horrible. After, you know, sort of a few months of use, you'd start getting all these clicks as it was getting clogged up. So the cons for the MPC 5000, there was a few glitches and crashes. There was a weird button combination that used to freeze the machine up. I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but if you press the stop button in combination with another button, I can't remember which button it was, it would just freeze and then you would lose all your work if you hadn't saved it, and that was very, very annoying. and it happened a good few times, but it generally was a very, very stable machine, but it did glitch and crash on me quite a few times. The synth parameter automation was just so bad. It was just, there was about 3 or 4 options from what I remember. You could automate maybe the volume, maybe the panning or something, but there was lots of stuff that they could have done with this synth, and I just think they really let down, Akai really let down users of the MPC 5000. I don't know what happened in the company. Maybe they lost some money and they just couldn't afford to keep on the team that actually implemented that synth. But it just seems crazy that they, you know, I actually have written to them a few times saying that I would pay up to 100 UK pounds for an updated OS. You know, and I imagine many MPC 5000 owners would take Akai up on that offer, and they really promoted it and said, you know, we've got this new OS for the 5000 synth. It updates all these features. You know, a lot of people use that machine to do more than just hip hop boom bap stuff. You know, it was an experimental machine just because it had the synth inside it, but severely underdeveloped OS, particularly with the synth. But overall, beautiful machine. I'll play you this track by one of my other pseudonyms called Scissors. This is called Problem, and it was just some samples I took from Azalea Banks having various rants, throwing her toys out the pram, which is quite funny. I do like Azalea Banks actually. I think she is a bit of a nut job, but this is Problem by Scissors, and this was all done on an MPC 5000.
Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Your problems with me are not my problems. I don't care. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Your problems with me are not my problems. I don't care. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Your problems with me are not my problems. Not my problem. I don't care. Not my problem. Not my problem. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Not my problem. Not my problem. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. I keep to real. 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 Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Your problems with me are not my problems. Not my problem. I don't care. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Your problems with me are not my problems. Not my problem. I don't care. Not my problem. Not my problem. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. Not my problem. Not my problem. Not my problem. Your problems with me are not my problems. Those are your problems. I keep to real. 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 I keep not my problems. Not my problem. I don't care.
So at the same time as owning an MPC 5000, I had an Octatrack. I got the Octatrack pretty much within a month of it being released, and I had this machine right up until this year, and again, this was a very, very difficult decision for me to let this go. I've finished so many tracks on it and done live performances with Dataline, as you guys might know, is the Elektron guy that does all their amazing live performances. Me, him and a bunch of guys from the Elektron Users Forum, we went down to a little venue in Fitzrovia, sort of North Soho in London, and we did this really nice intimate little live jam session that was about 4 hours long. Really nice guys down there, all got to sort of jam on our Elektron machines, and yeah, I just got a lot of nostalgia with the Octatrack. I mean, it's been out for like, you know, it'll be getting on for 10 years pretty soon, but yeah, this was obviously the Mark 1. I'm not really going to go into all the pros and cons of it. You guys know, I mean, I've mentioned them before. The pros of it, it's just it's a very modular environment. You can do some crazy things with the effects. It's a brilliant live machine for live jamming on. The sequencer's just super powerful. Build quality, the knobs a little bit wibbly and wobbly after a few years of use, but generally, I mean, it's just oozes kind of class and sophistication. I mean, it's just something very different and very scientific about the Octatrack. So yeah, not an awful lot of bad things to say about it, other than the outputs were kind of limited. You've got the main outputs and then an additional pair of auxiliary outputs. So kind of limited when you think about what the machine can do. It would be lovely if Elektron had released maybe a separate interface that could split out the output somehow, but obviously there's no connection on the back unless they figured out some clever USB thing to do with that. But yeah, it's kind of strange that they didn't also do that with the Mark II and sort of listen to people, but maybe they didn't think it was necessary. But I found that squeezing all those amazing sounds out of just 2 or 4 outputs was kind of frustrating. That's really the only reason why I sold it, is because I wasn't getting the actual sound quality that I wanted out of that machine. I do personally think it's very much of a live performers machine rather than a fully fledged workstation studio machine. It would be unfair to actually compare it to the MPC Live in many regards. This is kind of what I was trying to get to in my video where I tried to end this sort of ridiculous debate, because they are two very different machines. The Octatrack is very, very good at what it does, and it can't really be compared to an MPC, mainly because of those mixing options and the outputs. It's the sort of thing that you would use in conjunction with other MIDI gear, and you could get a really great sound quality out of it if you don't overcrowd those 8 tracks that you've got access to. Because it can do so much, it kind of almost defeats itself in a way. It does so much and it allows people to get so much sound out of it, but then physically it hasn't got the facility to get all that sound out of it. So it's a bit of a strange one. I think Elektron have given you so much, and then it's just down to you to be disciplined with the Octatrack, because it's just a mental, wild and crazy machine like most of their other machines, of which I've owned a fair few. So I'll be talking about those next, but this is a track again under my pseudonym Plover, which I finished entirely on the Octatrack. And this track is called For Once I Was Blind.
want to know what it is, what it's all about.
So whilst still having an Octatrack, and I think I may have sold the MPC 5000 to get this, I bought a machine drum because I was just very much into Elektron machines at the time. This was around 2012, I think, maybe 2013. And I bought a machine drum, and it was the fully fledged SPS1 UW Mark II. So this was the one that had the additional sampling time. I think it had 2.5 seconds of sampling time, but mental machine, really crazy looking. I love the red LED screen, or LCD screen should I say. Again, amazing sequencer, amazing MIDI sequencing capabilities, and the drum manipulation capabilities of it was just crazy. You could just do some really mad things, and you could make some amazing drones and soundscapes with these machines and it not behave like a drum machine at all. I can't really say too much about this machine. I mean, it had separate outputs. It had the Elektron sequencer. It had this kind of tinny, metallic, very metallic quality to it. But if you kind of, you know, pushed yourself with it and pushed the machine, you could get some proper crazy stuff out of it. So the pros, yeah, I mean, the design, the sequencer, the effects, just the internal craziness and all those lovely things that Elektron gave you after years and years of like trying to find machines that didn't have decent storage. You know, they came out with the Octatrack and the machine drum, and you know, they kind of wiped the floor clean, to be honest. I mean, I really do miss my machine drum, but again, I got to a point where I was kind of transitioning again and I wasn't getting the best out of it. All of the machines that I mentioned in this video I would have loved to still owned, but I just couldn't justify the space and the money and the time. I mean, I just would not be the person I am today if I had a museum. I'd probably just look like Howard Hughes in The Aviator. I'd probably be sitting in my studio surrounded by bottles of my own urine and a load of vintage studio gear, which wouldn't be too bad, but you know, it's not the best life to have, is it? So this track was finished entirely on a machine drum Mark II, and this wasn't even the UW version, so I did own a couple of these. This was actually done on the most limited version that didn't have the ability to extend the track lengths, I think. But this track's called Ride, and the vocals are by my friend Kyra Rocks. So all I did was record this straight into Ableton Live, and then I did a bit of editing and added the vocals on the top. But the main bulk of the music was all done on a machine drum SPS UW Mark I, I believe.
Touch you. can touch you. Take a ride. Take a ride. By my side.
So next up is the Teenage Engineering OP1. I've also owned two of these. So the first one I owned, it was amazing. I'm sure you guys know what this can do, the tape splicing on it and all the mad little synthesizers and crazy little sort of cartoon graphics that it's got on it. I was quite defensive of this machine when it came out. It got a lot of people criticizing it for being a bit of a toy. Now, whilst I defended Teenage Engineering at the time, I've now begun to realise what a lot of people mean about that, because the reason I sold it is because there was an atrocious amount of noise on this machine. I couldn't work with it. It wasn't a nice noise. It was like a cheap kind of, I don't know, analog digital converter kind of noise. I just could not get rid of that noise, and to finish anything on this, I think again it would be unfair to say that this is a fully fledged workstation that you can make fully polished and mastered tracks on. It would be an amazing addition to other MIDI devices that you've got it synced or slaved to, etc. It really does force you to be very creative, like the way you can chop up loops on the tape slicer and the tape machine thing, and it is a really cute little machine, a very quirky, very interesting machine, and you can get some beautiful stuff out of it. But again, I really do love working in one machine that doesn't have sound quality issues, hence why I love the MPC Live so much, because it just sounds so high quality and you've got all the mixing options. But with the OP1, I found just having that mini jack output a bit limiting, and I found that you couldn't really overload the recording input too much without things getting very, very dirty and distorted in a bad way. I did nearly buy another one recently. I had a little bit of money, and again, I just couldn't justify it. I just bought the MPC Live and I thought, can I, you know, it's pushing it a bit, but if I don't get any work in, it's going to be, you know, I'm going to sort of kick myself for buying it. So I ended up not buying it. If they reduce that noise, I would definitely be interested in buying one of these again. So yeah, the pros, like I say, all the interesting features it's got. Cons, just the outputs and the sort of signal to noise ratio was just not preferable for me. But an amazing machine. If you can get your hands on OP1, you know, you'll get a lot out of it. It's very good fun. So this track was done entirely on a Teenage Engineering OP1, and it's called Zulu, and I also put this under my Plover pseudonym. So next up is the Yamaha RS700. I got this for really cheap. I think it was about £160, and at the time they were going for about 260, 300, maybe even more on eBay. But I got this secondhand off of a well-known secondhand sort of buying, selling website called Gumtree that some of you may have heard of. I don't know if you guys in the States have got Gumtree, but some people call it Scumtree because it does bring out the dregs of society sometimes, and you end up getting ripped off, and it doesn't have any of the protection that you have on eBay. Although it has got better because I think eBay own Gumtree now, but it does get called Scumtree, which is quite funny because it's very apt. But this was actually quite good. The guy was really sound and really upfront. I went down to his house and he gave me this at a really good price. So I'm not going to go too much into detail because it's pretty much exactly the same deal as the RM1X. The sequencer is amazing. You can do some amazing MIDI stuff with it, but the sampling engine was just really annoying, and it takes smart media cards as well, which are really hard to get, and they're pretty slow, and they only go up to about 128 megabytes, I think. So kind of limited, but I wouldn't discourage you from getting one of these. They can do some interesting things, but I wouldn't spend too much money on it, to be honest. The actual chassis and the plastic can tend to get a bit worn out over the years. I've had actually two of these, and the last one that I owned had some really bad rub marks on it, so it can sort of deteriorate over the years. But I always found the screen to be very good on this and the RM1X. No degradation, considering these machines were pretty old when I bought them. And all the knobs are really super tight, and yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into this. I didn't really finish too many tracks on these machines, but as said, the universal track that I did under my Astra Magnum pseudonym, that was done on an RM1X, so just think of the RS7000 as pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to move straight on to the Analog Rhythm, or the Analog Rytme by Elektron. So I didn't finish any tracks on this. I bought it for very cheap off of someone on eBay. I thought I was going to get ripped off, but again, I got extremely lucky. I got this for £700, which is obscene. They said it was just a quick sale. They didn't give any details. I was very skeptical, and I just thought, right, I'll take a chance. At least eBay or PayPal can give me some protection if it turns out to be faulty. But it turned up and it was absolutely perfect. But I just didn't gel with it. I found it to be very different workflow and a very different sort of way of working to the Octatrack. It didn't sit well with me. I'm not too sure. It didn't kind of, I don't know. I've no idea what happened with this, with the Analog Rytme or Rhythm. Yeah, I just didn't gel with it. I couldn't get anything done on it. I mean, it had the really beautiful build quality that Elektron are known for. And I'm sure if I had one here now, I would get a lot more out of it at this point now, because There's a lot of stuff I do miss about the Elektron machines, but yeah, I just didn't get to explore that much. I was hesitant to actually include it in this video. I don't know actually why I have, because I didn't finish anything on it and I've not really got an awful lot to say, but I'm not going to put you off it. Go and check it out. The pads actually were very nice. That's the only real positive that I can remember from this machine, but I didn't explore it enough to give it a fair rundown. I also owned a mono machine as well from Elektron, but again, I'm not going to give you a massive rundown on that. It was kind of this similar experience to the Machinedrum. I think that and the Machinedrum are the perfect partnership, to be honest. The mono machine is a really, really beautiful synth. If you can get a hold of a second-hand mono machine, then yeah, go for it. They're beautiful machines and they do sound fantastic and a brilliant addition to other MIDI gear. I think there are plenty of people out there that have finished full tracks and full albums on this machine. It is completely capable of doing that, and the storage options are great on it and so on and so forth. But yeah, again, I didn't own a mono machine long enough to both explore all of its features or actually finish any tracks on it. So I'm going to leave that and the analog rhythm just to the side there, but I have owned them and they are beautiful machines in their own right. So next up, this is where it gets a little bit sketchy in terms of order towards the end, but I did own a Roland MV-800. So what to say about this one? Again, I only owned this for about 6 months before selling it on to, again, quite another well-known drum and bass person that bought it from me from eBay. I'm not going to mention any names, but the guy had released a few records that I'd in fact bought myself when I was a young drum and bass DJ upstart back in the 90s, and I thought, oh wow, I know this guy, and he actually bought it off me. But yeah, I'm not going to say who that is, but yeah, beautiful build quality. The pads were really great. They were surprisingly good after owning a MPC 1000 and 2500 SE, but I just felt detached from this machine. There was like a weird disconnect between the sequencer and the sampling engine and the pads. I just felt there was latency there. I don't know whether it was my actual the actual model that I had, but when I bought this, again, it was just another absolute bargain. The box was all immaculate. All the paperwork, all the protective covering, it still had a screen sticker on it, but I just didn't gel with the workflow. Again, I haven't got much to say about it because I didn't really spend much time with it and I didn't finish any tracks on it at all. Although, as you guys may know, RZA heavily endorsed this and has said that he finished plenty of stuff on it for soundtracks and stuff, so maybe it's just different ways of different people and the way they work. But yeah, Tubedigga did not gel with this. Sorry, I've got some wind and that's why my voice is going a bit funny. I think it's the massive lasagna that I had before making this video. Yeah, it's repeating on me a bit. So I think around the time or shortly after I got rid of that MV, I bought an Analog 4. I still had my Octatrack and I still had maybe something else, I can't remember, but Groovebox wise, I had, yeah, my Octatrack and I had the Analog 4. Now, this one's a bit of an odd one because in a similar way to the Rhythm, or the Rhythm, I can't say it. I think you need to be cuckoo or data line to be able to say this correctly. Obviously, you have the Elektron sequencer, and it's really nice. And so I only did that because every time I say analog rhythm in probably the correct way it's supposed to be said, it doesn't sound right. So I had to do a cuckoo impression to kind of say analog rhythm because it sounds, I don't know, a bit better when Cuckoo says it rather than Tubedigga saying analog rhythm. Yeah, anyway, moving on. So yeah, I didn't get the most out of the Analog 4, but again, amazing machine. Very, 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 very nice luxury piece of kit to own. But I struggled to get the best sound out of it, and I think because it was an analog machine and I didn't know enough about analog synthesis at the time. I'd never owned a fully analog synthesizer, even though this is under digital control. I was just so used to analog modeling digital synths, and I knew those machines inside out and I could get the best out of them, and the grittiness and the graininess and all the textures that I was familiar with digital synthesizers. But yeah, I wish I had one here now to have a play around, but yeah, it was just another one that I had to get rid of because it wasn't getting used as much and I wasn't getting the most out of it. And that brings us up to the current day with the Akai MPC Live. I'm not going to say anything about it. You know how I feel about this machine. It's got its quirks. It's got its kind of shortcomings. Is that the word? That is, yeah, it just didn't sound right. Maybe I should say it as cuckoo. Yeah, what can you say? I mean, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys now if it wasn't for the MPC Live. It's shown me that I can teach, and it allows me to teach. The big screen allows me to teach. The workflow allows me to sort of show what I can do with these machines and show you guys what you can do with these machines. So I'm not going to say anything else about the MPC Live. I don't think I'll be saying goodbye to this machine for a very long time unless someone wants to give me an Akai MPC-X. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys, and I hope you've enjoyed the music and learnt something about some Grooveboxes. And have a lovely Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.